Thank you, Claudia, and everybody. Welcome to a cold evening in November. It's good to be with fellow Kenyan folks. Um, Dave Lynn is the editor emeritus of the Kenyon Review and a member of the class of 1976. He is an the Kenyon Review, as you know, is an international journal of literature, culture, and the arts, which he edited from 1994 to 2020. Quite a run. He is also a professor of English and special assistant to the president of Kenyon. In 1990, he founded the KR Young Writers Program, something we'll want to explore. And in 1997, the KR Writers Workshop. His collections, Children of God, New and Selected Stories, appeared in 2019. One of his stories, Divergence, won the O. Henry Award. David Lynn is also the author of Wrestling with Gabriel, a novel and two earlier collections of stories, Year of Fire and Fortune Telling, as well as a critical study of the hero's tale, narrations in the early modern novel. His stories and essays have appeared in magazines and journals in America, England, India, and Australia. David Lynn lives in Gambier, Ohio, with his wife, Wendy Singer, a distinguished historian of India. A year ago, almost to the day, I had the pleasure of having dinner with David and his wife, Wendy, when I was back on campus. So it is delighted to introduce David and welcome to the next hour. So, David, just to kick it off, let's ask the standard question. How did you happen to become the editor of the Kenyon Review?
Well, first, if I may, let me say hello to all these people who are here. Many of them are old friends. Many of them are former students. Many of them are students who've become friends. Many of them are classmates or near classmates who go all the way back with David Griffith and me, almost all the way. We won't talk about the intervening years. What's crazy is seeing, people like Paula Stokey, who hasn't aged a day, drives me crazy.
Yeah, I know. I'm not happy about that at all.
But I'm really glad to see everyone here. It makes me very happy. One of the hardest things to teach students is the role that chance plays in life. As a student, you're told or you're taught or you come to think that if you do this and this and this and this and this in a kind of sequence, you'll come to a predictable outcome. And since those of us here are adults or beyond, we know that's not true. So I left Kenyon in 1976, having had a great 4 years, but really never thinking I'd be back on campus except for the occasional reunion. And I went off and spent a year tending bar in England at a pub, which was pretty great. And then going to Virginia, where I wound up getting a PhD because my mentor suggested I wanted to do that rather than live by the pen. I've never forgiven him. He could have suggested international banking or something. But I went on and became a writer. And then I lived in Washington, D.C. for 4 years. And Wendy and I got married and we had a really great life there. And I was perfectly content. I got more work done in those years than I ever have since, more writing done. But then in 1987, I think many of you will remember John Ward, who was a longtime English professor here and was a close friend and mentor of mine, called sort of out of the blue and asked whether I wanted to come back for a year as a writer in residence. And I said, well, that sounds like a blast, but my wife, Wendy, is finishing her doctorate in Indian history, and I can pretty much go anywhere. So it really depends on her. And he said, well, that's interesting because the history department just lost their Asianist. She should give them a call. And so there's the first bit of chance was that John should call me. The second bit of chance was that they would have a place for Wendy, and they flew her out here and fell in love with her and made her an offer before they actually made me an offer. So we came for 1 year, kept our place, very nice place in in DC. Had every intention of going back. I even kept my job there and did it remotely as I'm doing it now. And during that first year, 1988, 89, the then editor of the review, Terry Hummer, left precipitously and went to edit the New England Review. And so they asked me to stay on for one more year as acting editor. And so we said, sure. Well, that sounds like fun. So that second year, Wendy and I both wound up getting tenure track jobs and staying, and they did a national search for the editor of the review. So they found a very talented poet and editor named Marilyn Hacker, who took over for 4 years. And I was her associate editor, but basically I was an English professor, and perfectly happy to be here. We were, doing our thing. And then Marilyn left, and Phil Jordan really didn't have a choice at that point. He needed someone desperately, and I love to be desperately needed, and asked me to do it. And all these years later, here I am.
So you would say that fortunate opportunity met the right guy at the right time, and you and Wendy have had a terrific run. And I know both are just tremendously respected by their respective students. One of the things, Dave, that I think was really a hallmark of your tenure was the Young Writers Program. And how did that get started? And then the KR Associate Program come about. Those two, were you responding to a need that you saw? Was it a roll of the dice? What was in back of that as you brought those two fine programs forward?
Well, the Young Writers came out actually before I became editor. Kenyon was approached by Bard College, who had received a large grant from the Rockefeller Foundation to propagate a writing program that they had around the country to other liberal arts colleges. And they came to Kenyon, and the Kenyon came to me and said, are you interested in doing this 2-week summer program, with high school kids? And it seemed like a good idea. The money was good. It wasn't overwhelming. And so we took that on. The first year, I think we had something like 16 or 17 students and a couple of outsiders as workshop instructors. And we did that for a few years, working with Bard College. And after a while, I realized that really we had our own way of doing things here. Their pedagogy was fine, but we really wanted to concentrate on literature and literary things, and not so much the more free form that they had. So we went our own way, and eventually became the Kenyon Review Young Writers, which has been one of the great joys of my life. It is, I think most of you will believe me when I say it is for these kids. They come in and it's life-changing. And it's been a joy for me. And of course the college loves it, because a lot of these kids who are super, super talented come in and fall in love with the place and wind up staying. Although that was never really part of the intention. That's just a nice benefit addition. The associates program had a slightly different beginning, in that when I took over in 1994, the review was in deep trouble. And the college trustees were on the verge of closing it down. And one of the college trustees, who became a Kenyon Review trustee, David Banks, stepped in and really prevented them from doing it and helped save us. But so when they decided to keep the review going and asked me to be editor, one of the mandates was to bring it back to the Hill. There had been this feeling that the review was still well known in the outside world, but didn't play a role in the life of the college. So another thing that I love about stuff is that when you do something that is really, really just common sense in a mess, people treat it as genius. So it seemed to me pretty obvious that one of the ways to bring it back to the Hill was to get some students involved. And that first year we asked, I think, two young undergraduates to volunteer. We called them associates, and they they helped us put the magazine together. And last year, it had grown a little bit. I think last year we had 85 associates. And if there is a frustration, and Anna Duke-Reach, who's here, I think, knows my ongoing frustration, which is that we can't serve all the kids we want to who want to be associates and who deserve to be, but we just don't have the space or the staff to deal with them. So 85 is about the most we can do. Is that what I said? 85? That's what I meant to say.
Yeah.
And that's kind of overwhelming, but they are just incredible, incredible kids. And it's one of the things when people say, what are you proudest of in my years at the Review? Hey, Anna, people expect me to talk about the journal, and the journal has been a deep joy of mine and something I take great pride in. But for me, it's the students. It's the young writers. It's the associates. It's the students in my classes. This is what's given me. It's people like Megan Kenny there, who've been, or Laura Warwick, who stay in touch over the years, and that means more than anything else. I'll give you a quick scene, which I think you can all picture because you know the place, of one of the happiest days of my life where this really came home to me. It was during the summer. It was during the Young Writers Program. And we were having a lunch, I think, or an early dinner in the Great Hall of Pierce. And we had the hall to ourselves. And so we had, let's say, 85 high school kids, something like that. And then we had the RAs who worked with them, who were all Kenyan undergraduates, and the instructors who had all been my students and had been, Kenyon Review undergraduates, and then had gone on to get MFAs or other degrees and were coming back to work with us in the summer. And their children were running around. Some of you will know Andy Grace and Tori Weber, who are still, run the Young Writers Program now. Andy's an incredible poet, and their children were running around through the hallway. And so looking out at all of this, I saw 4 or 5 generations of Kenyon Review, Kenyon College kids and young writers and everything. And it filled me with a joy that is pretty rare in life.
That's a wonderful, wonderful image, Dave. One of the things, guys, if you do have questions, and we'll have a chance at the end to put your hand up, we're a small enough group, but the chat function is there. And if you have something that you'd like Dave to respond to, please feel free to just put it in there. I have chat up, and I'll be able to direct it over to him, and we can make this as interactive as we can. Dave, when you and I were talking about the review and we were getting ready for this, I asked you a question about the governance of the Kenyon Review and your board. And I found it interesting that it was structured the way it was, and you made the point of that you thought it was a significant advantage for the publication, the way that it was set up. Might you comment on that just a little bit, Dave, and share with the folks?
Well, I would be happy to, except that the board made me sign an NDA before I left.
Yeah.
And wrote a huge check, and I'm not allowed to talk about that either. Which only proves, if you believe that, it only proves I'm a fiction writer. And
yeah, I know you're a fiction writer.
Trust me with anything. No, one of the great strokes of fortune and one of the joys of my life has been the evolution of the Kenyon Review Board of Trustees. I don't think, in a sense, my role was executive director of a small nonprofit organization. And I would say that there isn't an executive director in the country who's been luckier with his board or is fonder of his board that I've known now for 25 years and more. They helped rescue the review. We did something back in 1994 and 95, which was revolutionary at the time, which was to incorporate the review as a membership organization with one member, and that member was Kenyon College. So Kenyon College has always been the ultimate authority. But we've had a board of trustees from the start, and they are just great and committed and wonderful people. And the fact that a bunch of them are here with us today, who I'm perfectly happy to shame. Jen Gunlock, I'm talking about you, and Jennifer Ashroddick, I'm talking about you, and Marcy Barr Abbott, I'm talking about you. And I would talk about John Adams, but I don't talk about him. And then there's Linda Cass. So this is, just been incredibly fortunate. The leadership, the support, and the friendship has just been ridiculous. They ought to be ashamed of themselves.
How big is the board, Dave?
So I think it's only 102, something like that. No, it's about 24, I believe.
And it sounds like they've been a real bedrock for the organization.
They have. Although I was talking to one of the longest serving trustees earlier today. Many of you know Matt Winkler, and we talk every few weeks. And he was saying that I should write a book about my years as editor. And I was saying, well, I might, but I could make a lot more money by getting some of the trustees or former trustees to pay me not to.
Well, every executive director has their board challenges. I didn't realize that till I started running a nonprofit a number of years ago. But it's interesting that the governance has been that effective, and it's been able to stand the reputation. I don't think many publications have that kind of structure.
No,
So
it really is unusual, and I've been blessed to have someone like Anna Duke Reach, who for the last 15 years, Anna, is it? Last 15 years has been sort of the right-hand person working directly with the board, and has made much of this possible.
Oh, that's terrific. So, your span has been it's been a great run. You must have seen changes in publishing. I mean, I know the student you are of the written word. What were some of the changes that you would kind of reflect on, both good and bad, that you think has kind of influenced you?
Well, it's a goal. We live, as I've been saying for a long time, but more so than ever now, we live in a golden age of literary writing. I mean, it's just incredible. The explosion of writing programs, not just MFAs, but PhDs in writing, high school programs in writing, elementary school programs in writing. And much of it is fabulous. There is more good writing being perpetrated today than ever before in history. And there are a lot of new journals, mostly online, but some in print, to publish them. The competition to publish is fiercer than it's ever been, and that kind of saddens me, because people get frustrated and give up, and that's always sad. But it's the reality of the world. It's very fierce. Obviously the technological changes have been enormous, and we decided to do something a long time ago, which was to start KR Online as a kind of parallel publication to the print Kenyon Review. So unlike most, we publish two distinct literary journals, and I think it's crazy, but I haven't been able to persuade anyone to cut back. And more recently, there's been a really interesting change in the kind of writing that's done. The genre writing, genres are crumbling, and I think that's really interesting. And so, kids are much more interested in fantasy, and things like video games have a really strong narrative thrust, and a lot of talented writers want to do that rather than publishing novels, even more than writing screenplays. And I think that's great. Here at Kenyon, we're pioneering new programs in science writing, science and nature writing, where we're training students to write about science and nature and global climate change and all these things, using literary techniques, so that it's not just for specialists, not just for geeks, but for general readers who appreciate really fine writing. I've taught that for the last 2 years, taught one of the courses for the last 2 years with a friend of mine who's a biologist and former smoke jumper. and we harass each other in class and have a lot of fun. And I think this is part of the future. I know that Sean Decatur, our president, is a huge supporter of this and wants us to pursue that going forward. So we're actually creating a concentration in science and nature writing. But I think that's just scratching the surface. I think that Kenyon, more than ever, is going to be known internationally as a center for superb writing about all kinds of things, but held to a literary standard rather than um, just simple efficacy.
Well, it's an interesting space, David, because climate change and everything that's going on. As you know, I'm involved with the Academy of Natural Sciences, and we run in partnership with Drexel. Obviously, we run an environmental science program, and one of the challenges we see is the ability to tell the narrative in a forceful way that isn't intimidating, fact-based, and taking it through. And I think that's going to continue to resonate with different populations as these issues need to be told different ways to get people to get called to action, and it also tell the story. So I think that's very, very exciting. As you sit back, Dave, most great leaders, and Dave, let's be honest. I mean, you did a terrific job of leading the review by any measure, and I know you're modest and you like to be humble, but I'm curious from a leadership perspective, as editor, what was your one or two bedrock North Stars for the review? Was there some fundamentals that you just said, if we do this, anytime we had a tough decision, what were the guiding values or the guiding principles that help you stay the course and do the job that you got done?
Well, in large part, it was to trust the people I was working with. Another thing, to go back to what I'm proud of, what I'm really proud of, and many of you will know these people, what I'm really proud of is the staff of the Kenyon Review. And it's a far-flung staff. I don't mean just the people in FinHouse, who are great, but I also mean the editors working around the country, advising and discerning and creating links with new people. The North Star, the bedrock, is to try our damnedest not to publish anything that didn't deserve to be published. The problem with that is that sometimes you just don't know. You have to wait a few years to figure out whether something bears the weight of time. But certainly we tried to do that. We tried to avoid simply the topical or the publishing. What's really hard is when you get a submission from someone who's very famous or someone you know very well and like and would like to support, but the work simply isn't good enough. That's where it can be tough, but you simply have got to do that. And I've received a lot of hate mail or hate emails in my time, and most of the time you just shrug it off, and sometimes it hurts, but that's just the simple truth.
Well, talent matters, right? I
Yep.
mean, we talked about that when we were together. I mean, you build great teams for moments like COVID. You build great teams for any crisis that comes. It's if you knew everything that was going to hit you, it'd be easy. But talent's certainly a good one. Along that line, though, as you said, you had to let a story marinate or maybe be out there for again. Was there one issue or one story that as you as your resume, you talk about some things that you're particularly proud of, but was there one story or one issue that you would just kind of say, this is the one that if people got to remember my work, this is the one I would hold up? And that may be a
Oh
hard
yeah.
question, but
Oh yeah. There are always one that I like more than all the others. The problem is it changes every hour or two. Um, and I'll tell you what I'm really proud of, and some of you will have seen it already, is the current issue of the review. Marcy's holding it up. November, December 2020 is the last one that I actually edited, and it's the only one I've ever done where I reached out to authors, old and not so old, whom I've come to know and admire and be friends with over 25 years, and asked them to contribute. So it's a curated issue.
Yeah.
Usually that violates a lot of my rules, but I'm very proud of that issue, and the cover by my friend Rick Landesberg, who's done our covers for a long time. I'll tell you a story because I like telling stories. And one thing, if Anna Duke Reach is surprised by any one thing that's happened so far, is that I haven't yet mentioned the Kenyon Review family. So make sure that I do before we get through. But one of the things about being an editor is that most of the time there ain't no glamour to it. And one of my memories was when our offices were still in the basement of Sunset Cottage. And Sunset Cottage is very nice from the outside. Inside, it's old. And I had a very intimate relationship with the ozone and mildew of the basement. And I'll always remember sitting in my office one Sunday afternoon when I really, really, really wanted to be home watching the Giants lose and drinking some scotch. But no, I had this old-fashioned U.S. mail tub of submissions to go through, and I had gone brain dead, just brain dead by that point. And I felt that I'd lost all discrimination. I couldn't judge a poem from a grocery list, but I just had to go through them. And then I pulled open this envelope, a writer I'd never heard of before, and pulled out the stories, and they just knocked my socks off. It was what I call the eureka moment, where suddenly your mind is functioning again. You are recognizing something that is very special and an extraordinary quality. And this was a young man named Thomas Glave, who was a recent immigrant from Jamaica living in Brooklyn, a young black gay man, very poor, who'd written these extraordinary stories. And I did what I almost never did in those days, was to accept two of them outright. They're very different from each other. Both of them went on to win numerous awards and anthologies. And Thomas went on to get an MFA from SUNY Binghamton, I believe, and is teaching now. But that's just one example, one story as an example of what redeems an editor. And any editor will have moments like that where, you feel like you've lost it, and then something extraordinary, a bolt of lightning hits, and that was very special.
That's a great example. We have a question from our listeners here, Dave, and let me read it to you. Given the breaking down of genres, how do you motivate current students to put down their phones, get off TikTok, send and write poetry and short stories? And how did you decide who to select for publications with all the thousands of submissions? So we have two questions there, but somewhat related. So getting the kids off their phones is one question. And what was the winnowing process that you as an editor and your team would go through?
Well, we began this whole session by talking about luck and good fortune. Teaching at Kenyon, forget the Kenyon Review, teaching at Kenyon is the stroke of good luck. The students here are very self-selective. And by the way, I wouldn't get into Kenyon today. Kenyon is a better school than when I was here. And the faculty is better, and the students are way better. They're way more diverse. They're way more interesting. They have issues. They're also more fragile, but that's a different story. But you don't have to convince Kenyan kids to get off their phones and get off the TikTok. They may do that too. But if they're here, if they're in a creative writing course here, they want to do it. I mean, I think the greatest testament to how special these kids are is we've been in session since beginning of September with 1,000 kids here on campus. And as far as I know, we've only had one, maybe two cases of student COVID in Gambier.
Wow.
That's just
remarkable.
amazing. And that's a testament to their seriousness, to their following the rules, to their wearing masks on Middle Path. You know, and a week from now, they'll be going home until February. So, you know, again, what are my joys? My joys are teaching Kenyan kids and being taught by them. And, you know, one of the things I say all the time, especially when we're reading literature as much as teaching creative writing, I say my job is not to really teach you anything. It's to open you up so that you can spend the rest of your lives buying books from Linda Cass and enjoying the pleasures of literature because you've developed the tools and the skills yourself, and that's my role. As for deciding what to publish, that's really hard, and really that's why we started KR Online, because up until, say, for the first 10 or 15 years I was editor, we never really got more in the way of submissions that we really wanted to publish than we could publish. And about 15 years ago, we reached a point where that was no longer true. We were having to say no to things that we really, really wanted to publish. And so we started KR Online, and now I think we're in a similar position where we're getting so much that's great. You know, another mark of that is that when I was in that basement of Sunset Cottage, as opposed to the glories of Finn House, boy, is it special. I don't know who's responsible for it, but it's a pretty great place. But when we were in Sunset, we would get 1,000, maybe 2,000 submissions by mail literally over the transom in the course of an academic year. And we could pretty much stay on top of that, you know, in-house without too much trouble. You know, I and a few editors and a few associates, we could manage that. And then about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more, maybe 15 years ago, submissions went online. And that was just like lighting TNT. It was so easy to do, so simple to submit, that the numbers began to grow astronomically to the point where we simply couldn't handle them. So we cut our reading time back, and and last year, because we knew a new editor was coming in and we didn't want to saddle her with too much in the way of manuscripts and stuff we'd already taken, we cut the reading period to 2 weeks, the submission period to 2 weeks, from September 15th to October 1st. And in those 2 weeks, we got something like 8,000 submissions. So it's and they're good. You know, people who send their work to the Kenyon Review, they're serious. So it's really good work. I don't have an answer for it going forward. I mean, you know, up until now, in answer to the question, I just trusted my gut. You know, what seemed to me so good that you couldn't say no to it. You know, what was so good that you simply had to publish it. And now it's overwhelmed. I think the new editor, Nicole Terras Dutton, who's great, I think she's going to have to figure this out going forward. By the way, something I should have copyrighted and didn't was, I've got the best no in the world. No editor has come up with a better no than I have. My no is, dear so-and-so, dear Jackie Dreyfus, thank you so much for submitting your fabulous story. I read it with great pleasure and delight. I so wish I could take it, but my backlog won't allow me to say yes. How's that for a no?
Very, very, very gracious, but I'm sure you have other people start your car on certain mornings.
Oh yeah.
But we'll go from there. You know what? You know, Dave, I know you not well, but the conversations have been illuminating. Did you ever wish you had more time for teaching versus the review, and how did you kind of reconcile those two passions of yours?
Well, it's really interesting you should ask that. You asked that at exactly the right time. Because I've always loved teaching, but it's always been sort of in addition to the other stuff I do. And that's been very frustrating and exhausting and draining. And I chose not to teach this fall because I was planning on having knee replacement surgery in a couple of weeks. But given the COVID crisis, I may not do that. But I am scheduled to teach in the spring. And I'm actually really looking forward to it because for the first time in 30 years, it will be my main professional activity. It'll be something I'll be able to devote myself to rather than finding time in addition to running a nonprofit organization. So I'm really looking forward to that.
So another question coming in from the audience here, Dave. Could you share some of the consequential moments in the life of the Kenyon Review? And consequential, I guess, could be read a couple of different ways, but what were you shared some of the magic moments and survival and those things, but were there some particular, high points and low points?
There are lots of things to talk about in that book I promised, but I think one of the great things that the community shared in was the Kenyon Review Award for Literary Achievement, which began as a fundraising dinner in New York on its own, and allowed us to celebrate people like Seamus Heaney and Edgar Doctorow and Joyce Carol Oates in the early years. But I was frustrated that we did this in New York and it really didn't affect the college itself. So after about 5 years, and when we'd raised enough money, and again with the leadership, this was really a trustee event. They were the ones who took the lead in this. And with their leadership and generosity, we began bringing people back to Kenyon for the KR Literary Festival. And I think that over the years, that has been just tremendous with people like Margaret Atwood I'm blanking on names. Anna, help me out. Who should we be talking about who came here and changed things around so much? Ann Patchett was fabulous a few years ago. Or who would you say, Anna?
You're muted, Anna.
Hillary Mantel.
You're muted, Anna.
So Margaret Atwood to more recently, Colin Tobin, Rita Dove, Hillary Mantel, T.C. Boyle.
And the thing about these people that Anna's mentioning, what made it great was they weren't doing the typical drive-by reading. They would come and spend a couple of days with us here, and they would have private sessions with the KR associates and some of my classes, and they would become part of the community. And I think it was as moving and surprising for them in a lot of ways as for us. I know T.C. Boyle was here last year, and we had just the best time. So those are some of the highlights I can think of.
It's when I was back on campus, rather than just come in and out, I spent 3 days, and I would agree with you. I mean, if the students just blow you away. I mean, for me, the biggest contrast to when you and I were there, Dave, was just the quality of the students, the depth of the students, the maturity at an earlier age. I mean, to me, it's one of the really unique differences. The fact that you have 1,000 kids and 2 COVIDs, I mean, that's extraordinary for a maturity index there. We have another question here. This is from Jim Flynn, and I must admit, I'm not sure I know the origin of the question here, but he's asking if you could discuss the thought process behind the establishment of the New Era Kenyon Fellows. I'm hoping you know what that is, Dave.
Yes, we have a program that began about 7 years ago called the Kenyon Review Fellows. And this came out of the college trustees coming to me a couple of years prior to that and saying, did I have any interest in starting an MFA program with Kenyon and the Kenyon Review? And I knew what was behind it. There's this myth out there that MFA programs are cash cows, which they're really not. But there was a thought that it might be a way of bringing in some money. And I thought about it pretty briefly and answered, no, not really. The country does not need another MFA program, and logistically and politically, putting one together in Gambia would be very hard. But what I had recently to that been out and paid a visit to Stanford and met with the Stegner Fellows, who are extraordinary writers post MFA or PhD who spend a couple of years at Stanford writing and just honing their skills. That's a great honor. And I thought, there's not enough of those, and we could do it and put a KR spin on it in a really exciting way. And so what we did was we started bringing in 2 fellows every 2 years, and they continue to teach 1 class a semester, spend a third of their time on their own exciting new work, and a third of the time working with the Kenyon Review to read manuscripts, to do programs, to do all of that. And they've been fabulous, fantastic. I will tell you that actually goes back to the 1950s when John Crow Ransom got a grant. I think it was from the Ford Foundation. It might have been Rockefeller, but I think it was Ford, to start a similar program called the Kenyon Review Fellowships. And he gave money to Flannery O'Connor and W.S. Merwin and a number of other really great, young, promising writers that who desperately needed the money in those days. There was nothing went with it. They didn't have to come to Gambia. They didn't have to teach or anything. It was just money. It was inspiration to start that up again a few years ago. And we're still having trouble finalizing the funding on it, but a number of the trustees, including that Mr. Flynn you mentioned, have been really generous in endowing one of the fellowships so far, and I do hope that we're able to finish that up in the next few years.
That's great. Dave, as we come near the end of our hour here, are there some other comments or observations, knowing that you had this audience tonight, that you'd like to make or comment on?
No, really. I think you all have. I'm so glad you stuck with me for this whole oration, and I hope you've been able to soak up some of the love and warmth and friendship I've been sending out your way. It really makes me very happy to see you and share this and to know you're out there.
Well, that's generous. And one final question, and then I'll turn it back over to Claudia. But we touched on this a little bit, but we were class of 76. We have a number of different classes here. You've touched a little bit on the difference from students from those days to today. Are there any other, as a professor and as an editor and as a resident of Gambia, is there any key insights there you might share that would inform our observation of Kenyon today?
Again, I feel that we have fabulous leadership at the college right now. The administrative structure and the board of trustees are as strong as I've ever known here. The faculty is very strong, and the students are amazing. They're very diverse. They're socially committed. They're intellectually vibrant and alive. I will say, and you've all heard this, that colleges are, people like to rate colleges based on the jobs that their students get immediately after graduation. And to put it in technical terms, I don't give a flying fuck what my students do in the first couple of years. In fact, as many of you know, I spend a great deal of time trying to talk them out of going to grad school or law school or starting a serious career or anything like that, because it takes a couple of years for students to figure out who they are and what they need. And so rather than judging Kenyon on the basis of what they're doing in a year or two, find out what our students are doing in 5 years. And I can tell you from long personal experience of my students that in 5 years, they're really going great guns. They are doing what they want to do. They're pursuing their loves. They're making the world a better place. And I'm incredibly proud of them. Megan, Kenny, I'm looking at you.
Well, I think that is a thoughtful observation and well done. So, David, let me. There's a couple of folks in here who are expressing the same thing that I would express, and that is to thank you. A great quote here: "For all your years of good sense and excellent taste."
Thank you, Paula.
And let me also thank you for your mentorship of the students. I know a number of them in other lives, and you never know the moment you make a difference in a young person's life. So thank you for your service in that capacity as well.
Well,
So with
I
that,
would like you to bear with me for a second. If I can figure out now, I'm not going to know how to do this. I would show you if I could, because it's in the next room over. A couple of the trustees and who are here tonight, and Anna, arranged for a beautiful painting of Finn House to be done for me, and gave it to me as a going away gift in June, and it's now hanging beautifully in my newly painted living room, and so I'm just going to have to show it to you when you all come visit.
well, I hope that is sooner than later, Dave.
I hope so too.
And again, thank you very much.
Well, David, thanks very much for doing this. I appreciate it. And Claudia and Tristan, thanks for making this happen. And really lovely to see you all tonight.
Well, again, thank you, Dave. And Claudia, let me turn it back to you to bring us home.
Sure. Yeah, thank you so much, Professor Lynn. This was wonderful. And thank you all for joining us. And this evening, we certainly look forward to doing some more virtual events in the new year through the Philly Regional Association. So look out for that and have a wonderful evening. Thank you all.
All right, guys, Godspeed and be careful, be safe.
Absolutely. Good night.